Today I'm comparing two different kind of player piano systems. One, an acoustic piano, and two, a digital piano. Stick around. Hi, this is Ted Barsula with Alamo Piano Galleries. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and list them. We like to interact. And also I wanted to mention, please shop our online store at alamopianogalleries.com. And some of the items I'm going to be discussing in this video will be available for sale there. So you can go through and take a price look at some of these things. First, I wanted to talk about an acoustic piano versus a digital piano. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on those two instruments, but I mostly wanted to focus on the player system. And a lot of that has to do with the seasonality and the time of year that we're in right now, which is approaching holidays. And that seems to be the time of year where everyone thinks about, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a player piano in the house for the holidays? And whether it's a special event or a certain occasion or some type of celebration, a party, or maybe you just want a player in your house. Are you going to get a digital piano with a player, or are you going to get an acoustic piano with a player? Well, those two things come down to a couple of things. Besides the instruments being different, the player systems are going to function pretty much the same. But the instruments, you have to compare an acoustic to a digital. And some of the top things to consider is the sound, the maintenance, the versatility, touch sensitivity, of course, price, and then also the pedals. And the pedals are real important to a lot of functions for a player and also for someone that's going to be recording on a player system, as opposed to just a player that knows how to use the pedals, a player meaning the person. And also the preferences that the music genre, the level of proficiency of the player, and how many hours they're going to be practicing, where the unit's going to be located. And then there's also, I'm going to talk a little bit about hybrid pianos. So when you're considering an acoustic or a digital, the things you need to think about is like, is this for a student growing up? Is this for someone that has a schedule where they can only practice between midnight and 6 in the morning? A lot of those things come into play. If you're going to be practicing or listening to music in off hours, perhaps you're going to want to have a digital piano so you can control the volume or put it in the headphones. And that way you won't be a nuisance to other people that are on a schedule where they're sleeping during those hours. And the mechanisms on an acoustic piano and the types, well, there's two types of acoustic pianos. There's a grand piano that vary in length and size, and there's also uprights that vary in the height, which is the size. And each of those, the larger the piano you get, the bigger the soundboard, the longer the string, so you're going to get a louder sound out of a big grand piano, just like you would get a louder sound out of a tall upright piano. And I would not recommend a player system for any piano that's like a spinet. On the digital piano types, the mechanisms you have are going to be a digital upright piano, which has pretty much replaced a lot of the popular spinets and smaller size console pianos over the last 30 to 40 years. And also there's a new item, a digital portable piano. Some manufacturers call it a digital portable grand, even though it may only have 61 keys, but it sounds like a grand, so it has that 9-foot sound in it. And then there's also digital grand pianos, and the digital grand pianos are made by a number of different manufacturers. There's a number of different styles of grand pianos. Most of them come down to a digital piano and a grand piano, or an extremely micro baby grand or a mini grand style piano. It's just a piano shaped object to some extent with a digital piano in it and speakers. Some of them put soundboards in there and they use resonance. There's also a hybrid piano. There's a number of hybrid pianos on the market where they actually use a true soundboard to transfer the sound from the digital instrument through a soundboard so that it sounds more, the sound dispersion and the overall appearance of the sound is more exactly like an acoustic piano. And that is the one thing that is funny about a digital piano, is that it's always trying to sound like a true acoustic, whether it's an upright or a grand. An acoustic piano can only sound like an acoustic piano. And there's not a whole lot of ways to modify the sound on an acoustic piano. You can do a lot of effects to it, but in terms of changing the overall timbre or masking it or hiding it, it's not like going from a Fender Rhodes to a grand piano to a string synthesizer. Digital pianos afford a lot of different tones and a lot of different sounds, and so you can do a lot of different effects with them. Those effects can also be used into the digital playback system, so that when you're listening to a digital player, you're going to get a little bit kind of a different sound than you would out of an acoustic piano. And a lot of the acoustic piano player systems, they have an audio file that goes along with it. Some of it is a real recording that the piano plays with, and others it's a MIDI instrument production file. So it has MIDI drums and MIDI bass, so it's all digital sounds along with the acoustic piano sound. So there's a lot of different mixes in player systems and in the playback, I guess you could say itinerary, not just solo piano, but piano with voice, piano with production or ensemble and voice as well. So which one is better, an acoustic piano or a digital piano? People always ask, which one is better? And I always say, well, it depends. The sound, well, the one thing, the acoustic piano, there's no argument about it. Some people do want to argue about it, but I always thought that an acoustic piano produces the best sound because it is a real tone-making instrument. There are 88 different tone generators there. Every set of 3 strings is a tone generator with its own hammer and its own key and its own given frequency. So it actually is an instrument that makes tones. A digital piano doesn't really make a lot of tones. It reproduces them. In other words, it's playing back a recording any number of different ways, which may sound like a soft touch, a hard touch, a medium touch, and include the touches of other keys next to it. So a digital piano is kind of like more of a true reproducer of sound. It doesn't actually generate the tone, even though every digital piano has what's inside it called a tone generator, and that is the sound source. Some of them, most of them are recordings, which are samples. And in terms of versatility, utility, and portability, well, an acoustic piano is always going to take at least 2 people to move. It could take more if it's a heavier grand. A digital piano, you can pick it up and walk off with it. Sometimes if it's a digital grand, you may need 2 people to pick it up. It could be in a heavier box or a heavier case. And a lot of the digital pianos, particularly some of the more elite, what I like to call top of the line, top tier digital pianos, they have true resonance in wood casing, so they are heavy. They're starting, especially the uprights, they're starting to get heavy. Not as heavy as an original upright piano because there's no cast iron frame inside it, and the working mechanisms are going to be a little bit lighter than all of the wood components. A lot of them do feature plastic keys. If they have wooden keys, sometimes it's just the underneath of the key part that's wooden. There's a lot of different actions and components. The other thing I wanted to say is about the least expensive acoustic piano you could get that would be worth having would be anywhere in price from $1,000 to $3,000, and that's without a player system. Whereas a digital system, they start anywhere from a little under $500 and they go all the way on up to ridiculous amounts of money if you want to spend that much on a digital. Anything with a player system is going to cost you some money, especially if the keys are going up and down, whether it's on a digital piano or it's on a true acoustic piano. The solenoids that make the keys go up and down are not inexpensive. They do cost, and you have to put 88 of them in there. Then you have to put a motherboard and all the electronics to make sure that they play properly, the MIDI files. And so there's a lot of different costs. And what I wanted to do here, before I get into specific product, is go through and have a listen to the digital pianos that we have, and then also maybe 1 or 2 different kind of acoustic pianos. We're going to try to put a couple different items out here for acoustic and digital player systems, and that's really what we're going to be listening for. Let's check it out. Between these two instruments, there are some obvious differences, and I do want to discuss them. You're going to have a warmer, authentic sound to an acoustic piano. The sound produced by a sample and coming through a speaker can sound like a recorded piano as opposed to a real piano. And the one thing I do want to mention, and this is critical, acoustic pianos do need to be tuned. If you're listening to a player system and there are compatible MIDI files or recording files going along with that acoustic instrument, that instrument has to be in tune with the MIDI tone generator and the sound generator for any kind of recording or voice that goes along with it. So tuning is something that is going to have to be done on a player system if it's an acoustic piano. Otherwise, it's not going to sound very entertaining at all. It doesn't take much for the pitch to wander off on a piano, and then you can tell that it doesn't match with the bass components, particularly if the lower bass section is off. The entire arrangement, for some unknown reason you can't tell, just sounds like it's sour all the way through. It's a lot easier if the high notes drift out a little bit, because it kind of gets a little bit of a honky-tonk, but there isn't a honky-tonk sound that goes with the low bass section. Those frequencies are so low, it just throws everything out of pitch, and it sounds like it's all warbled or coming through like dream music through a puddle. The other thing I wanted to mention is you're going to have a much better action and a playing temperament on an acoustic piano, even though there are some quite expensive digital pianos that have really excellent actions inside it. Some of them actually have real working upright and grand piano actions inside them. It's still not the same thing as a hammer hitting a string with different minute changes of velocity, so you get a different kind of tone. Most digital pianos have no more than 3 to 5 ways to play a tone, unless you get an extremely sensitive master controller and an extremely expensive software program. It's going to be really hard to emulate a true acoustic piano. And a lot of times, not all digital pianos, particularly the portable ones, come with pedals. So pedals is something else that's always up in the air. And in terms of the genre, whether you would really want a digital or an acoustic, that depends on how much, where, and what type of practicing you're going to be doing. In terms of listening back to a player system, which is what I wanted to kind of focus on here, Roland makes a GP9M, which is a player unit that you can sit down and just hit a record button and play. And then when you're finished, you can just hit stop or hit record again. It takes a second to store the file, and then it plays it back, and the keys go up and down. It is one of the quickest, fastest, easiest working recording systems and also playback systems I've ever used on any kind of digital player piano system. Unfortunately, Roland only offers this on their grand piano model. It's not available on any upright models, which I think would definitely help sell. We've had a couple people ask for even a digital upright player. I wanted to mention years ago, Yamaha sold a large number of disclaviers that were not even on what I would say a true piano case. They had 2 different types of mini grands that featured the real working disclavier actions inside it, a real piano action. And the keys went up and down, but it was an entirely digital instrument with a wooden soundboard and speakers mounted inside both of the, they had one was called a mini grand and one was just called a semi grand or something like that. And they were neat, attractive little units. They were not overly expensive, but I'm talking 10 to 15 years ago. Now, in this day and age, most player systems that you get do not have the ability to sit down and record your own piece. And I think that kind of defeats what for me is one of the most important things about a playback system. And that is, if you are a composer or someone who just wants to fool around with putting together your own piano pieces or your own songs, your own compositions, a recording playback system, which is a player piano on a grand or an upright, is a phenomenal tool to have, whether it is acoustic or digital. That's all I can say, because it stores, not only does it store your mood, it stores your recording, your song, and all that kind of stuff, but you can also tell when you watch yourself play something back, no matter how many years has gone by, what you were thinking at the time you were trying to pull that composition out of nowhere. And so if you are a tentative composer type or someone who likes to put together your own songs, I definitely recommend any kind of playback system. Now, the Yamaha has the Clavinova, and most of the Clavinovas, as well as a lot of the other, say the Roland and Kawai keyboards, you can always record a performance, but the keys won't always go up and down. But the advantage is that at least it gives you a digital recording of what you were trying to put together, or it's you may want to call it not really a writing session or a composition session. I'm going to sit down and hit record and have an inspiring session. I'm going to daydream and make believe I'm not recording, and do that for 15 or 20 minutes and stop, and then do another 10 or 15 minutes and come back in a week or two and listen to yourself, which is the last point I wanted to make about player systems on an acoustic piano or on a digital piano. If you're going to be listening to it all day long, in a hotel lobby all day long, in a music store, which we have done on numerous occasions, I will tell you this, after 90 minutes to 2 hours, regardless of the volume that you're listening to it at, and we always have it at a low listening level, a digital piano is a little bit harder to listen to over hours and hours on end, as opposed to an acoustic piano. There's something of the edge on the sound of an acoustic piano, no matter how loud or soft it is. It doesn't have a shrill or an extremely high to mid-high frequency that seems to always be there in kind of a, I don't want to say a nagging or annoying way, but it does tire your ear to listen to a digital piano for an extensive length of time, as opposed to listening to an acoustic piano the exact same amount of time. One is a tad bit more pleasing to the overall human ear. That's just my opinion. That's a good point for me to kind of wrap this up and say, if you have an opinion on which sounds you prefer, a digital or an acoustic, and also, how do you listen to that sound and what does that sound mean to you? Is the instrument more of a tool for composing, which means if you're a composer or a writer or inspired player who likes to make up your own things, you're obviously going to like anything that records, whether it's digital or acoustic. But most musicians that I've come across, regardless of age, and the older they are like me, they're going to want always acoustic instruments, but it really is surprising the number of teenagers that absolutely, and all the way forward in age, that absolutely prefer an acoustic instrument over a digital. But again, it all depends on the purpose. And I was talking here about player systems, which means listening back and playback. So let's have your opinions. Until then, I thank you so much for your viewership, and we'll be looking for you again in the future. Thank you so much. This is Ted with Alamo Piano Galleries. We'll see you soon.